Right, we are live, and then I'm going to get this link to you as soon as possible. Right, that link should be with you now, Craig.
Yeah.
Everything's set up here. I'll get that link out to myself. Yep. Right, there we go. Right. Right, so give us 2 seconds, guys, whoever's joining us. I'm going to get this link out to social media, and then we'll crack on with the live Q&A. But, copy. So how have you been anyway, Craig? What's been happening?
Oh, it's been an interesting half year so far. You'll remember that one of my bits of work was establishing a new test pilot school.
Yes,
We
yes,
chose
yes.
of all locations. We chose of all locations China to do that, and all was going swimmingly well until this dreaded COVID-19 thing kicked in. So all my guys out there was about 18 in country, all escaped and back to their home countries, and we just next week we'll hopefully send the first 3 guinea pigs back to China to get back on with the job in hand.
Wow. And obviously you're a busy home dad at the moment. Is that being a handful at the moment? What's that like?
Oh, daddying's great. Second chance for me. So it's really good. Mrs. has gone ahead on the advance party, and I'm taking the kids up to back up to Wharton tomorrow. Make my phone go silent while we're here. I forgot to do that. There you go. Yeah, so they're all run them ragged today. Bathed them, got them ready, packed the bags, packed the car several times, and they're all very excited to get away from here. Lockdown fever is well and truly in place.
But yeah, so there's a few people in now. But
Boston Road, Shetland. Chris Holden, hello, Chris. How are you doing?
Yeah,
Elaine,
so like
we don't know you, Elaine, but hello.
there's going to be a few people coming in, but I'm going to introduce Craig to you. Craig, this is going to be a general introduction, and I'm sure Craig will be able to tell you a bit more about his career. But Craig was a former Lightning, and then he went on an exchange to fly the F-15 Eagle in America, and then he also tested the Typhoon in the UK. But yeah, can you give us a bit of a debrief, or a brief, sorry, of your flying career, just so the folks in the comments can get a grasp of what you flew?
I've been a very lucky victim of circumstance many times in my life, although sometimes it didn't seem like it. When I was a young lad growing up at school, my mum and dad house in Glasgow was right under the approach to Glasgow Airport, and I saw Vanguards and Viscounts and stuff like that flying over, and I wanted to be an airline pilot. But luckily, just about the time I was getting ready to apply, the first Gulf crisis emerged, and oil prices rocketed and airlines stopped recruiting. So I had to scratch my head and think of other things to do. And luckily, really luckily for me, the Air Force was the only real option to that. I went to Biggin Hill, did the interviews, carried the pine poles, carried the oil drums, and they said, "No, you're a bit immature, young man. Go off to university and get yourself a proper degree." So which I duly did, and studied civil engineering, building things to later bomb. And then during the time I was a member of the University Air Squadron, and that was just great fun. I got a very, very average degree and 225 hours flying the Bulldog over my time there. Joined up, did lots of training, did the basic training on the Jet Provost, did the advanced training on the Hawk and TW on the Hawk. And having won the best bombing trophy as a student, they sent me to the Lightning, which was obvious connection between dropping bombs and lightning. So that fabulous airplane to learn about airmanship and flying and management and all those sorts of things. And then I was lucky enough to go to be an instructor on the Hawk at Chennai again. Great job. I really loved the teaching bit. And that set me up nicely with experience as a teacher and an air defender to go on the F-15 exchange that you mentioned. Down to Florida. It was a dreadful location, but somebody had to go and sit on a sandy beach and feed the dolphins and stuff like that. And did my time as an instructor there, so teaching young American students how to fly the F-15. Came back, touched the Hawk again as another squadron commander at Valley, just for a very short time before being asked if I wanted to become a test pilot. I said, Valley's not very nice at the moment. It's winter and it's wet and horrible. So yes, I'll do that. Thank you very much. And they sent me back to America to fly the US Navy Test Pilot School, Patuxent River, Pax River. And I came back from that to Boscombe Down, and I was, again, incredibly fortunate to be one of the first RAF test pilots to fly the Typhoon. I did that for 3 years till the end of my Air Force career contract came up, and moved from being the poacher to the gamekeeper, or the gamekeeper to the poacher, I can't remember which, from Air Force to industry, and worked at Wharton as the Typhoon project pilot. Then I had a spot of bad luck in 2003 for the second time when I had to jump out of a Hunter, put an end to those rushing around days. I spent a bit of time in Fort Worth on F-35, cockpit design stuff, and then came back and worked in business development, marketing essentially for Typhoon export sales. So was involved in Qatar, which has come good in the end, Korea, which didn't, Japan, which didn't, Singapore, which didn't. Many places have made the wrong decision, in my opinion, but left that and now self-employed and consulting, and I've spent a lot of time in China. Goodness me, these messages, these questions quickly.
Yeah, so like if you can remember, like Craig, you can scroll up. So if you start from the top and you can work your way down. And yeah, I'm going to let you go and enjoy and get your questions in, guys, because this is going to be a good one.
Right, so I see Jin Zhang there. As a pilot who flew both Typhoon and F-15, can you compare the two aircraft as far as dogfighting performance? I heard Typhoon pilots saying F-15 is Typhoon's clubbing, maybe too. Saying fighting. All right, so yeah, the right way around. It is. The F-15 is a fabulous airplane of its day. You have to remember that its day was designed way back in the early 70s, and Typhoon is a 90s, 2000s design with every stretch of advance that you could get into it in terms of instability aerodynamically, which is great for maneuverability, and a flight control system that meant you didn't have to worry about breaking any limits. The airplane would look after you. Whereas the F-15, you had a great flight control system, but you still had to observe the limits. You could quite easily bend the airplane if you were a bit too ambitious, particularly if you had a lot of G on and you wanted to roll the airplane, which is important to be able to do to change your orientation in a dogfight. In my time, I've flown the 15, the 16, the 14, and the 18, and they're all great airplanes, but you would need a force gauge and a stopwatch and some data to find out the slight advantages and disadvantages in each. Whereas you strap into a Typhoon and you know right away that you've got an advantage. Massive, big, strong wing, lots of lift, flight control system that's harnessed the instability, and you can just do what you want and what you need to do with it. So, I was never fortunate enough to go and fight against much else other than a Tornado, which isn't really a fight in itself in a Typhoon. But yeah, Typhoon and F-15 definitely clubbing those poor baby seals, Jim. Hope that answers your question there. James Nellums, how did the Yanks take to being taught by a Brit? They loved it. The Queen, I milked the Queen and the loyal bits and pieces. I always told everybody that the Queen was paying for my hire car, even though she wasn't really. But she wouldn't allow me to drive it, so all the other guys on the squadron had to drive the hire car when we were on exchanges to Key West or Miramar or places like that, which meant I could have the odd beverage or two. Very different approach to training between the Americans and the Brits. You can see exactly where the American training machine comes from. It comes from the days of Vietnam, where there was a production line of getting guys through training and very quickly getting them out into theatre, into Nam, and being the wingman. And your job was to stick a search and report and do exactly as was told to you by your leader. Whereas the British system is more tailored towards teaching leadership and equality in the formation from the very beginning. So you would expect a new wingman to be able to take the lead and take the initiative in a dogfight, if it was 2v2 or 2v4 or whatever. If he happened to be the one who was in the right place at the right time, he would be the one to step in. Whereas the American teaching was more, the wingman stays back there, the leader gets engaged first, and you cover my 6 o'clock and get on with it. There's more to those things. Very much a regimented system. You had to start briefing 2 hours before takeoff, even if it was just a 5-minute refresher brief. You couldn't cross the blue line on the concrete to go to walk to the airplane because the security police would come and pin you down. But I could put up the I'm a Brit card, let me out here, and it was all well and good. Okay, right, let's go back up to the top and come down again. Good evening to everybody. Ross Monroe. Ross Monroe, hello. Did you ever fly any missions in the Lightning on intercepts of bears in the North Sea around the Shetland area? No, I didn't. I got scrambled a couple of times, but things turned back. I did, however, get to intercept a number of badgers out of Cyprus when we were on our annual air-to-air gun firing camps. Once we'd done the majority of the firing, we took up QRA duties there, just on a very low-key basis that wasn't really a proper threat. But there was a couple of badgers on a couple of days in succession, flew out of Syria, went along the Mediterranean, and we went up to intercept them. And it was quite good to get 2 chances at it. You get your camera, you fly in the airplane with a stick between your knees, alongside this airplane, try and take some pictures and get all the details you can. You go and see the results after day one, think, I can do better than that, and you get a second chance the next day, which I did. I got some really great images in there. Well, I would have got some really great images had the photog section put more film back in the camera. So that was a bit of a tricky one. I was so pleased with the efforts of getting in nice and close and focusing and getting the details I wanted, but there was no film in the camera second time. Lots of good stories about QRA and the Lightning. So, you sat there, you do 24 hours, 2 of you with 2 airplanes armed, ready to go, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, rain, snow, whatever. I remember one horrible, snowy, blizzardy winter's evening on the top of Binbrook Hill. And the deal would be, when the hooter went, there was 2 snowplows at the far end of the runway, and they both start up and proceed down the middle. They turn around, they go back up. So that was your runway. You had 4 snowplow blades worth of runway available to you to get off the ground on. And the airplane, with its 350 psi tires, wasn't the best at staying straight, even in a good day. What was Elaine? Elaine Wesley. Compared with the size of the F-15 for the size of such a F-16, would you say he's still quite agile? Absolutely. A little known fact, well, it's well known to the guys who fly it, but maybe not to some non-flyers in there, that the F-15's flight control system featured a movable stick, whereas I think you all know that the F-16 has got a side stick that doesn't move, it's a force sensor. So it's really just in your fingertips, a little bit of motion in your wrist, and the input is picked up and fed to the flight control surfaces and moves. The F-15 has that system bolted on top of a long, movable control stick. And the result of that is that it senses the force before it senses the movement. So the flight control surfaces are getting the input before they otherwise would, by fractions of a second. But with an airplane, as you rightly point out, as big as the F-15, you needed that to get the control surfaces working, to get the airplane moving in the direction you wanted to. Yeah.
So, like, Craig, if you scroll up a bit, because there's quite a few questions that were coming in before that. Let me see. Let me see. Sorry, guys, I'm just trying to like scroll up myself. I think it was.
So I can see more of these.
Yeah, Eagle Eye, I think, says, "Hi, Craig. What are your thoughts on trimming it in turn?" So if you like scroll up, you can kind of see because obviously they come up quick.
Let me remember. Eagle Eye. Thank you for the question. That's dragging the memory up. So most modern airplanes flight control systems always automatically try and trim the airplane to 1G conditions. So how do I explain it? You're not in a turn for that long, so there is no real need to trim it out, but the airplane is trying to trim it out and reduce the stick force anyway. I'm sure I've not answered your question properly, Elliot. If you come back and ask me a bit more, I'll get my chance of thinking straight and come back with a better answer to that one. RF Alt. Hi Craig, I'm hoping to be successful in joining the RF as a pilot. What advice would you say to your younger self if you were going for a selection again? Oh boy, that's a good question. The Air Force I joined in we can argue 1980 is a very different Air Force than it is today, 40 years later. In 1980, we had all sorts of Victors, Vulcans, VC-10s, TriStars, Jaguars, Phantoms, Buccaneers, Lightnings, Tornadoes coming in. Massive Air Force, and it's much, much smaller now. It was 132,000 people when I joined. I think it's about 45,000 strong now, with a lot of contractors in there too. So it's a very different Air Force. It is so much more professional today than it was then. I'm not sure I would have passed muster going through selection today. They're after a lot. They're after very intelligent, quick-witted, dedicated people. But I'm always one that says, if you've got a dream, go for it. Don't sit there going, oh, I wonder if I could do that. Give it a go. What's the worst that can happen? You'll be turned down, you might fail, but you'll know then that you gave it your best shot. So go for it, is my advice to my younger self. I would the Freckle Punny. That's a Freckleton person, I think, in there. How would you best defeat a Typhoon in an F-15? Well, you wouldn't. End of question. Thank you. Xinjiang again. As a test pilot, did you any high alpha manoeuvres with the F-15? How does it compare with the right fighters such as F-15? Cool, there's some good questions here. Yeah, so the question is all about high angle of attack and what's the difference between a flight control system in the Typhoon that limits you to a particular angle of attack based on a number of factors so that you don't ever lose control of it. The airplane will always do what you're asking it to do by the stick, or something like the F-18, not so much the F-16, that has a much higher angle of attack limit, but that comes with some other limitations that if you exceed them, you'll end up with a departure, the airplane going in a direction that you didn't really want it to go. Yes, the F-18 is able to pull a lot of angle of attack and point its nose where it wants to go quite readily. But when it does that, it loses a lot of energy. It's kind of a one-stop, last chance saloon type of event. You've got to be sure that you're going to get that shot and not be then trying to get your energy back after you've ditched it all to try and put your nose. Of course, all that goes without saying. If you've got a high off-bore sight missile and a helmet-mounted sighting system with which to point the missile, you want to be the high-speed cheerleader. Don't do any manoeuvring. Just go as fast as you can. Let the missile do the work. Point your head in the direction you want the missile to go and pull the trigger. So therefore, still every day, rather have the airplane that I can't overstress, that I can't depart, and a helmet display that allows me to put a missile wherever I'm looking. So it's the original death ray type thing. Somebody retracted a message there. Chris Holden. I never did fly with Tony. I know him. I've met him. I've drunk beer with him. But he'd moved on before I got there. Jude Mal, how has your fastjet teaching advice differed in each country you've instructed in? Aircraft, how pilots learn in different countries, how bases operate. That's a very insightful question, Jude. The skill of a good instructor is to be able to understand your students, and everyone's different. There is the old saying that there's no such thing as a bad student, there's only bad instructors, and the instructor's got to find the right magic buttons to get the message across to the student. I think I touched on it a little bit earlier on. In America, it was very much, this is what you do, this is how we teach it, this is what you say, and if the student doesn't get it, the student doesn't get it. That's a broad generalisation. In the UK, you give the guys as many cracks of the whip as you can. When I was doing majority of my instruction at Chibnall, the guys we were dealing with had already spent 2 years plus any holding time in the Air Force, and they'd cost the taxpayer a fair amount of money. You didn't want to lose them. You wanted to give them as much opportunity to succeed as you could, and sadly that didn't always come to work, and you had to say to guys, sorry mate, this is the end of the road, this job's not for you. Different styles in different countries, different styles for different students, and different styles depending on where you were in the additional training part of it. So the students would get some, you talk about it amongst all the instructors who'd flown with him or her, and you'd we'll give him an extra 5 hours, we'll give him an extra 10 hours, and see how he comes at the end of that recovery package. And at the end of the day, somebody, senior experienced instructor, and that became me as I went through my career, had to make the call. And it was a hard day to sit down with somebody who you're shattering their dreams and say, this is not yours. Okay. Oh, hang on. I skipped a few there. What happened to that? Oh, Elaine, you're asking about angle attack and speed to fly the. There's a magic thing that angle attack is the number, and speed comes as a secondary effect to that. The angle of attack that you fly in an F-15, if I remember correctly, was 21 units. That doesn't mean it was 21 degrees, or doesn't 21 radians, or 21 whatevers. It was just the way the gauge was marked, and at 21 units, you would be at the correct angle of the airplane incidence for the tail not to hit the ground when your main wheels hit the ground. And if you were a big, heavy airplane with tanks and missiles and lots of fuel, 21 AOA could be 180 knots, or 21A with a light airplane could be 140 knots. In airplanes without AOA gauges, you work out your approach and landing speed based upon the fuel weight, and go it's 120 knots plus 5 knots for every 100 kilograms of fuel, or something, some mental arithmetic like that. So, but angle of attack takes away any need to know or calculate an approach speed, because if you're on the angle, you'll be on the right speed, irrespective of the weight or mass of the airplane. Adam Cotton, hello Adam. I love the way they love the paintings behind you. Yeah, me too. The Typhoon one was painted for me by a very dear old friend, Chris Golds, extraordinarily retired Chris Golds, Venom pilot, sim instructor at Chivener, and he painted DA7, which was one of the Italian prototype Typhoons, and he painted it. Not that it ever took off from Chivener. He painted the Chivener in the background. You can't quite see the details, but there's some lightnings lined up on the pan there, and he called it past, present, and future, which was quite nice. And then the lightning one is down the A5 Pass, limited edition print, one of that. Very nice picture too. Mike Child, good evening, Craig. What led you displaying the Hawker Hunters? Had you flown them in the Air Force? That's an interesting one as well. The one thing about going through the test pilot course is once you've done it and graduated, everybody thinks that you're an expert on everything. And of course, you're not really. You've just been taught a few tricks and a few techniques and how to test airplanes and how to write about it. So not long after I graduated and I was doing one of my first visits up to Wharton from Boscombe Down on Typhoon matters, a dear friend popped his head out of his office and said, "Craig, are you checked out on the Hunter yet?" Of course, Boscombe Down had a couple of Hunters which we used for chase sorties and continuation training, and I'd done one of the 2 sorties. I said, "Yeah, so are you free next weekend? I've got an air show at Biggin Hill and I could do with some extra pilots." And thereby starts the story of Hunter display flying. I got the qualification to fly the Hunter through the Air Force system at Boscombe Down. I'd never flown the Hunter during my flying training, and at the time when I first got a display authorization, I think I had about 5.5 hours total time in the Hunter. And then we did a 4-ship display at Biggin Hill back in about 1996. And then once you're in, and you keep going on. So very limited previous experience on it, but great fun to fly. Templar 7832. Oh, there's a story, if ever there was one. Hi Craig, this is so cool of you. I'm a virtual Hornet pilot in DCS. I know a lot about DCS. Can you tell me something about how it flies in real life, please? I love the airframe. The airframe is a rugged airplane. Of course, any airplane that can land on an aircraft, well, it doesn't really land on an aircraft carrier, it crashes controllably onto an aircraft carrier, is a rugged old thing indeed. great flight control system, like the F-15 I mentioned. So it has a force sensor at the top of the stick and a moving stick as well. So you get that little bit of anticipation coming into the control responses, which is good. It's not the most powerful airplane in the world. It runs out of steam, 1.5, 1.6 Mach. But who needs to go there all the time? Well, you don't, except it's nice to be able to do it. How does it fly? Yeah, it's one of those airplanes that trims to 1G, so it's very simple and straightforward. You've got a head-up display, you've got a velocity vector, a little symbol, like the London Underground symbol, circle with a couple of wings on it, and if you put that on the horizon, the airplane will fly level. If you put it at 5 degrees up, it will climb at 5 degrees. Wherever you put it, the airplane will follow suit. So it's a lovely airplane in that respect. And as I've said before, you can really get some staggering angle of attack, short-lived, and potentially departure or minor loss of control. But it's a nice trick to be able to do. Xinjiang again. Oh, hang on, I jumped you. Where did you go? That's not where I was. I've lost it again. Hang on again. Jin's got too many questions. I'm going to skip some of yours for the moment. Did you ever deploy the F-15 speed brake in flight doing BFM to force an overshoot? Yes and no. If I remember correctly, there was an angle of attack limit of about, I can't remember what the number was, but when you were manoeuvring hard at high angle of attack, the air brake was disabled because it had a destabilizing effect as it pops up between the two fins. If you put the speed brake up at high angle attack, you eventually lost directional control of the airplane, so it was inhibited. But at high angle attack, you were creating so much drag, you were slowing down very quickly in any case, and the sought for overshoot would come. Jude Mile, have you ever done any air photography? Yeah, I've done a bit. It's the QRA sortie against the Badgers I mentioned before. That was professional air-to-air photography, if you like, part of the job. I used to be more avid photographer than I am now. I was trying to sneak my camera into the cockpit when I could. Much easier in the back of a two-seat airplane. I got a lot of very nice air-to-air pictures during my time on the F-15, tanking, air-to-air refueling, going places with the boys. It was good. Elaine again. Have you been through the Mach Loop and over Donanook training? Been through the Mach Loop lots of times. The clever boys in the simulation world developed the Mach Loop geography for the Typhoon flight simulator that we used to take to air shows to show people. It was a competition with it was a sort of Top Gear leaderboard of who could get around it quickest. Of course, you were going supersonic, which you're not allowed to do for real, and you knew it was coming, you knew you weren't going to die, so it was a bit unrealistic in that respect, but great fun. So for a time, I was top of the leaderboard. Donanook, passing by Donanook, in and out of Penrice on the Lightning, and I think I might have dropped a bomb there in a Hawk at one time. Oh, Jin's got some really good questions here. Is there a perceptible difference between flying a clean Typhoon and a Typhoon with a standard air-to-air QRA loadout or a strike loadout? And the answer is going to surprise you. The answer is no, and that's so indicative of the flight control system, how that works. The flight control system works that if the pilot puts in a deflection to the stick top, back, forward, left, right, whatever, of X millimeters, whether he's got no weapons or fully loaded and fully fueled, the demand to the flight control system is to get a roll rate or a pitch rate. And so you move the stick the same way in a light airplane or a heavy airplane, and you get the same roll rate or pitch rate, because it knows how heavy the airplane is and it moves the flight control systems appropriately. Jeff Middleton, hello. What do you remember of the Hunter 50th at Kemble in 2001 and Barry Pover? Oh, Barry, what a great gentleman. He was instrumental in getting a lot of the Hunters in the UK back on the register. The 50th event at Kemble in 2001, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, but we ended up with a big Dorito-shaped formation of 15 Hunters flying in, led by Andy Cuban. Airplanes from Netherlands and all around Europe, and we were in there somewhere. I can't remember where it was, but quite an amazing day to get 15 civil registered Hunters in the sky at the same time. Only achievable by the efforts such as your good self, Jeff and Barry. The Frackable Punny again. What do you think of the new generation? Oh, generations. There's a whole debate in itself. New generation F-15EX coming online for the USAF. Amazing. Much like debates about the Hawk as a trainer, what do you replace a Hawk with? Well, nothing much better than a Hawk. What do you replace an F-15 with? Nothing much better than an F-15. So, continually refining it, upgrades to the flight control system, composite materials, lighter weight. It doesn't really surprise me. All that surprises me is that the F-35 lobby have allowed it to happen. But if you want a great air defense airplane with loads of missiles and big wing, great. Excuse me, I had a little drink here. Gamer dude, have you had interaction with Pakistan Air Force? And what is your opinion of them? I've met a few in my time, mostly through the trade air shows, the Farnboroughs and Aero Indias and all those ones where we open the doors of the Typhoon simulator to anybody who wants to come and talk to us, have a go, understand it. I've got nothing bad or good to say about them. They're competent aviators, and I'm not saying that to be disrespectful, but they're good. They've got F-16s, they've got Thunder, they've got good equipment and a great history of having had their training from the Air Force. So very limited is there. Charmingly cynical. I want to see what you said. Does the RAF do war games air-to-air fighting with itself? And if so, is this done at combat speeds? Absolutely. War games, war games to me has a wider connotation, more of a full engagement of the whole Air Force machine. So command and control, airborne early warning, ground-controlled interceptors, air-to-air, air-to-ground, done with other nations as well, because everything in modern times has been a coalition effort, so you've got to know how your allies work together. So yes, and it has to be done at combat speeds. Train like you fight, or fight like you train, is the mantra in there. So done at combat speeds for sure. There are limits, of course, in peacetime about supersonic and overland and distance away from the coast, but within those exercises, whether they're the large force exercise, as it's called, or whether it's a 1 versus 1 dogfight, you've got to practice the way it's going to be for real. And while I'm on that one, nobody in their right mind really wants to get into a dogfighting 1v1. You want to stay well away from something that you might lose, can be lost in the drop of a hat, and do the dirty work at beyond visual range, if at all possible. If the rules of engagement allow you to do so, they don't always allow you to do so. Jude, again, do you still fly now? What would you fly if you could? Fancy a beluga? No, thank you very much. Buses and stuff like that don't turn me on at all. I do. I've got my PPL. I fly a Cirrus SR20 on occasions, and I've just started the progress of getting my PPL-H. All sorts of new skills to be learnt in flying helicopters, using your feet and never let the control column go still. Eagle Eye coming back with a trimming question. As an airline driver, we're always told not to trim in turns. Just interested in a test pilot issue. I don't really understand why you'd be told not to trim in a turn, because if you're not on trim and you're not concentrating and completely watching what you're doing, the airplane's going to wander, the nose is going to drop. So, I would always trim if you can. Yeah, if it's a little jink to left or right, maybe not. But if it's a protracted turn of more than 60 degrees, I certainly would see no reason not to trim. Might be your company's policy to tell you to do that. I have no idea. Not my skill set, those ones. I keep jumping around. Mike, how do I do this? Templar. Templar said, in your interview with Mike, you said you left the military as you weren't interested in commercial. I agree. Yeah. But how did you come down mentally after flying all those service? Well, that's a good question. The mental bit and mental health is a really important thing these days. And I think, particularly as blokes, we do owe ourselves some honesty, if you like. There is no doubt that I went through a very black down period after the ejection from the Hunter ended my fast jet flying opportunities forever. I broke my back in the process, as I said in that interview, and there was no way I was going to get in a bang seat equipped airplane after that. For a time, after my recovery, I was back at Wharton watching other test pilots fly, in inverted commas, my aeroplane. I had been the lead project pilot. It was my project to all intents and purposes. And I really struggled with that. I really struggled with losing that on associated with a back injury with a lot of bodily function issues. Probably too much information for you guys out there right now, but very spinal injuries and nerve damage do create some other issues, and having to deal with that and losing not your reason, losing the prime focus of your life was very hard. I put my hand up and took counselling, and will advocate that very strongly for anybody in a similar situation. If it's feeling tough, talk to somebody, guys, girls too. Talk to somebody. Jim, I'm not going to answer that question in here. That's rubbish about F-35 and Typhoon. Thanks. Jin, again, for maximum brake turn in an F-15, did you have to use two hands to pull the stick at maximum flex? No, not initially, but if it was a prolonged engagement when you were at full back stick or close to full back stick for a time, I did end up going two-handed just to keep it going. It also gives you a bit of a sort of, bit of leverage to be able to twist your head around and look over the back of your cockpit. Nick Breen, thank you for your question. ASRAM or 9X? ASRAM every day of the week. Thank you very much. Jim's got some really good questions. How did you find flying the P-51? Would you consider flying the Spitfire? I'd love to have flown the Spitfire. I dropped every hint to my children at my 60th birthday that they should maybe buy me a flight in a Spitfire, but they didn't. club together and do it. That's them not having any inheritance. P-51, two-seat P-51 during test pilot school. Crazy horse. Was just awesome. It was the spirit boosting sortie you needed 6 months into a 12-month slog of pretty demanding academic and writing, report writing course. Lovely airplane. Interesting. The one thing I found, if it would bite you quite without any notice. If you do a tightening turn, just keep pulling, it'd be nice and smooth, you'd be getting there, then all of a sudden it would break loose and a wing would drop or a wing would go the other way and you'd flick out of it. It recovered quickly after that. But, there was I with thousands of hours of fighter time, caught out, if you like, by that characteristic, because it didn't tell you that it was going to do it. It was quite happy, quite smooth, then all of a sudden it let go. Whereas most other airplanes will vibrate, buffet, wing rock, shake and shudder, and then let go. P-51, no warning, off it went. Elaine Wesley again. What is the highest G you have flown, and what was it like? 9G is pretty much the accepted physiological limit these days. You can make airplanes are obviously stressed to go a bit beyond that, about 1.15 times that before you start doing damage. Because if you do overstress them, if the flight control system allows you to do it, you don't want to do repeated damage. 9G is pretty demanding. Interesting discussion that you've got G suits, trousers that wrap around your thighs, calves, and abdomen, taking air from the aircraft system that senses the G force that pumps air pressure into the trousers to help stop the blood draining from the top of your body into your feet. And it's all about keeping blood pressure in your brain. So if you don't have blood pressure in your brain, you start to lose your vision first off, you start to lose your hearing second off, and then you become unconscious, which is not a good thing to have in the middle of a dogfight. Advances in aeroplanes from 15, 16, 18 Typhoon, Rafale onwards. 9G is up there where everything's tested to, certified to. And interestingly, Typhoon was specified to have the capability for the pilots to sustain 9G whilst still relaxed. What does that mean? If you're flying 9G with just a set of G trousers on, you're also having to stress all your muscles to contract your blood vessels, to keep the blood pressure up, to stop the blood draining down. So what did Typhoon do? Well, we had a pressure jacket, we had pressure boots, we had G trousers that covered more skin area of your legs, and we also had pressure breathing to work against the pressure jacket. All of those things meant that all you were doing at 9G was breathing against the pressure, and you didn't really have to strain any muscles. And the great thing about the G-force is that it's the prolonged fatigue aspect of it, not the instantaneous doing 9G, but it's doing 6, 7, 8G again and again and again is physically very demanding and very tiring. But with modern anti-G kit like Typhoon has got, you could really do relaxed 9G. Interesting bit to it, when you start then putting helmet-mounted display, helmet-mounted sight onto the pilot's helmet, you take the weight of the pilot's helmet up to around about the 2 kilogram mark. At 9G, that 2 kilograms is 18 kilograms. And I like to point out to people that that's like 4 newborn bumper babies stuck to your head, with which you're meant to still be able to look around all over the place and point your missiles with a helmet sight. You do grow neck size, you do grow collar sizes in the process, because those muscles need to be able to move that helmet around. I did a sickening amount of time on the centrifuge as we were refining the Typhoon helmet mounted display, just to get the balance right to make sure your head wasn't getting stuck in the back of the seat and stuff like that. But I think we came up with a good solution in the end. Adam Cotton, hello Adam. I've heard that by the time the Lightning was tried in 1988, had a shooting war broken out, then it would never have been used in combat. What are your thoughts in this regard? Yeah, a sports car of an airplane. It was a research project that the Ministry of Aviation and Ministry of Defence said, the Ministry said, we'll have them, we like them, don't wrap it, we'll take it as it comes. 2 missiles and 2 cannons, very limited fuel. It wasn't a stellar air defence airplane as in today's standards, but in the standards of the time, where it could get up to 50,000 feet in Mach 1.8, Mach 2 in a heartbeat, and then not until something like Typhoon comes along can we get anything similar to it. That bit to get out and intercept the bombers coming, that's what it was designed for. It wasn't designed as a knife fighting telephone box F-16 thing. So probably. Tony Dixon, hello. Flew with you in Thunder City in 1999. Thanks for some interesting answers so far. Good. I've forgotten all the answers I've given so far, but I'm glad you like them. Did you ever get airsick while pulling Gs and or doing aerobatics? Any tips on how to overcome airsickness and in-flight vertigo? My tip in how to avoid it is to fly lots. In the early days, my first flights on the Bulldog, which were probably one flight every week, maybe a bit less than that to begin with, I thought it was quite nauseating. And if I've gone back to flying after a long layoff, it can be quite unsettling. So yeah, the advice is fly lots. Jude Marl again says, my granddad used to ride a motorcycle on a centrifuge thing back in the 1940s. Surely that wouldn't have been RAF trained. I think I'm assuming that you might mean the old cage of death or circle of death thing, where they were a very small diameter cylinder of wire spinning around, or a sphere of wire goes spinning around. You've seen it, you can do that. That definitely wasn't RAF training. The centrifuge that the RAF had, if you go and look at Dr. No, the James Bond movie from way back, or was it Dr. something? One of them's got a centrifuge with a mad scientist pinning James Bond down to his cheeks and by his shoulders. It's a very old machine like that. A friend of mine, good old Terry Adcock, had a short circuit in it, and rather than it stopping when it got to 9G, it took him all the way up to 12G, which before the man went and pulled the plug out and took the electricity away from it. I wouldn't have liked to have done that, I don't think. Mike, have you got any questions up your sleeve while I'm scrolling up here? Yes, absolutely. Mental health does affect both sexes. But I think the male population are less inclined to fess up to it first. So yes, apologies if I was sexually biased in my comments there. Charlie Wilson. Hello, Charlie. That's the first one I've seen from you. Do you think that in modern air warfare, within visual range, is or will be very limited? The hopes are, as I said, nobody really wants to get into that, because that comes down into a lot of pilot skill, and one minor mistake can put you at a disadvantage. So you don't want to get there, but you want to be able to do well should you have to get there for whatever reason. Maybe your beyond visual range missile didn't work, and you're now forced into a close-in fight because you can't run away. There's lots of reasons why you want to have the ability to do well in both beyond visual range and within visual range environments. Lima, I don't understand what you're saying. Sorry about that. Jude, please don't tell me you're a helicopter fan. Oh, I am a helicopter fan. That's fine. Okay. Anybody want to know about being shot at? Interesting story was Typhoon has a system that's called the Missile Approach Warner system. And guess what? It warns you when a missile's coming at you. It's specially tuned little mini radars around the airframe. Other products are available that detects fast approaching small missiles. And obviously, at some point during the test and development of the airplane, you want to make sure that it works. So, pop quiz for you guys: how do you test a missile approach warning system? Do you fire missiles at the airplane? Could be a bit of an expensive trial, that one. So the answer is, what you do is you get a clever army bloke who's got a tank going spare, and you sit him on the coastline in the Aberporth range with his gun barrel pointed down a particular heading, and then you fly up the reciprocal heading slightly displaced by about 100 metres, and clever boffins do all the sums, do all the elevations and stuff, and tell him when to fire so that the projectile from the tank whizzes past your wingtip about 100 metres away with its sonic boom, and it should be enough to trigger the system. And you do it pointing at the gun, you do it going the same direction, so it's firing from behind, but all offset. And when I did about, I don't know, half a dozen sorties of this, and each sortie consisted of about 20 or 30 shots being fired, repeating the thing, slightly different conditions each time. And you could feel the shell going past the airplane. You could feel the shockwave of the shell going past the airplane. And at the initial brief for which I thought was a joke, but the tank commander said, yeah, if you can just give us about 2 or 3 minutes notice before the first run, because we need to get the tank gun barrel warmed up. Because apparently, not many people know this, that a cold tank barrel is not very accurate. It's a bit bendy. It doesn't. It's not bedded in right. So I agreed with him that I would give him as much notice as I could, and he could fire as many shells as he liked to warm up the barrel. Just make sure it was nice and toasty warm and firing in the right direction when he was trying to miss my airplane by 100 meters. Okay. Okay, there's two questions, one from Jude and one from Jin, who've been prodigious in their questions this evening. So I'll do them show them respect of answering their last questions as my last two. So Jude, don't do that. So how do you train in each aircraft for shooting? Have you ever done any on-ground shooting training? So as a military officer, on ground, if you mean on-ground shooting training, yes, with a pistol and a self-loading rifle. We have to do 6 monthly proficiency drills on those. If you mean shooting air to ground, yes, done lots of that. I've trained lots of people to do that on the Hawk at using Penrice range, a controlled pattern against a Hessian target with a microphone behind it that counts the pulses of shockwaves as bullets pass within a certain distance of the microphone. And I've also done air-to-air shooting in both the Lightning and the F-15. Lightning was done against a sackcloth target towed by a Canberra. The F-15 was very different indeed. It was a plywood dart-shaped thing towed by another F-15, again with a microphone on it, so you got the scores real time. whereas with the Lightning one, we had paint-tipped bullets. Everybody, 6 or 7 guys would fly against the same flag, and then come back and they drop it back on the airfield, and you count the number of red holes or blue holes or orange holes. So yeah, done it, and air-to-air shooting is a skill. It's not surprising that in the 1950s or so, the RAF used to pay for fighter pilot officers to have shotguns and do shotgun practicing to get all about the lead and sightline and all the rest of it sorted out. It's a skill, but modern lead computing gun sights and radar-guided, radar ranging all make it very much more accurate, and you just put your gun sight pipper onto the target, and if it's steady, you pull the trigger, and hey presto, it's a hit. So that, but the best fun stuff is by far using high explosive air-to-ground ordnance and seeing the explosions on the ground as you whiz back over the top. The last question from Jin is, how is the voice-activated command system in Typhoon? Can voice prompts be customized, or is it a standard female voice as in the SIG? So there's 2 questions in one there, Jin. The warning system is very much a female voice warning system, as it's been proven that people pay attention to females nagging more readily than male voices. It's about the pitch and the frequency and all the rest of it. So even with the female fighter pilots, they are more attuned to listening to a warning that's in a female voice, female register, than a male register. The Typhoon one's a good story. Bitching Betty, nagging Nora, or whatever you want to call her, is actually a woman called Susan, who works for the BBC, and she was based in Madrid. And Spain had the lead design responsibility for that voice system, so they employed her, and we gave her all the warnings that she had to say, and whether it was a severe warning, a harsh warning, or a light warning, or an insignificant warning, she had different urgency in her voice. And I had to do an interview on Radio 4 once speaking to her, and it was so weird speaking to this voice who'd only ever previously told me in short commands what not to do, or what to do urgently, like pull up or reheat fire or whatever. So she was good. The voice-activated command system is different. That doesn't involve the Susan at all in this. You make a recording when you join the Typhoon squadron or Typhoon fleet that is your voice template. You go through all the command words that are in the system, and you speak them in to with your face mask on, so in the realistic environment, and that's recorded. And when you go to the airplane with your little memory stick equivalent, it knows that it's you, and it's tuned to your voice, your accent. It doesn't really matter what you say, as long as you say what you said when you recorded it. So if the command was, for example, target Alpha Bravo Charlie, and you said bananas Alpha Bravo Charlie, as long as that's what you said when you want to do it for real, it would work. Never used for situations where it's high G, because your voice is going to change. It's difficult, and it's probably a very over-engineered system, because Alexa is far better recognition rate than the limited vocabulary that the airborne voice command systems have. So that's that. Wuttering on. Mike, your turn.
Yes, so I want to ask, what helmets were more comfortable to wear? Was it the US Air Force, the helmets they wore, or the helmets the RAF wore?
Oh, good question. Lovely debate to be had by that one. More comfortable by far are the American ones. But okay. Thank heavens, I was never put into the situation of having to eject with one of them on, because they're not the same protection as you get from an RAF standard helmet or Eurofighter standard helmet. Putting the American one on, you just feel like you've got a plastic shell on the outside, whereas Typhoon ones and standard other RAF, even non-display helmets, are very much there to protect you. my lightning ejection was very, very high speed, and I got to see my helmet after the event, and it's like you did a hard-boiled egg and you bashed every bit of it, and it was just completely pliable. Every bit was cracked, and apparently my head was undamaged. Some would argue that I'm completely damaged for life. But,
So, like,
no,
yeah, for our the more nerdy side of our viewers, were you wearing the MK4 at the time or the MK10 on that ejection?
seat or helmet.
Helmet.
The lightning ejection was a Mark IV helmet, Mark IV seat, I think. Yeah, it would have been 1985. I can't remember the exact chronology of when they went in.